All right, so we will get started. I'm gonna let y'all know that there's nobody in the classroom. I think the rain scared everybody away, so I'm gonna take off my mask so it makes it easier for you to hear me. And if someone comes in, I'll put it back on. And let me bring up our presentation. All right, so welcome to the third session of our Student Success Series, Study Smart, Study Skills Note-Taking and Test-Taking. I'm Brianne Varela, and I work in Student Development Services as the Assistant Director of the Sophomore and Junior Year Experience, and then I'm also a member of the Student Success Team. So I am actually in charge of student success coaching, which I'll mention probably a couple of times. I am pretty proud of that program, and it can be very helpful when developing study skills. I would love it if some of you would turn your cameras on. Like I said, I think the rain scared in-person participants away, so it makes it a lot more fun as a presenter. If I can see some faces, and please feel free to participate. Thank you all for turning your cameras on. Feel free to participate. You can come off mute and ask questions, stop me if anything is unclear, all of those things. So I'm going to put us right here. And we will begin. All right, so I came up with some general tips for studying, and I think that these are important. Treating college like a full-time job. I mean, that's what all of you are here to do, is to get your education. And if you really treat your college career like it is a career, that allows you to manage your time effectively and efficiently. We did have a time management session last week, but I think time management has its tentacles in everything that helps you to be successful. So I'll mention some time management pieces as we go on. It's really important to use your daytime hours to study and complete assignments. So if you have time between classes, let's say you have an hour between two classes, maybe your first instinct is to just go back to your room or go back to your apartment and just relax for a little while or grab some coffee or something like that. If you intentionally take that time and knock out some assignments or spend some time studying, though, that will make it to where you have more time in the evenings, and that's where a lot of fun stuff tends to happen, or you can have more time to do other activities. So it's really important to consider using those free and kind of sprinkled throughout your schedule daytime hours to study so that you can manage your time later on and have extra time in the evenings. Also, working constantly on assignments in small chunks every day. If you put things off and wait till the last minute and finish things in a frenzy, is that always going to be your best work, the best product that you can produce? Probably not. So if you start planning your schedule a couple of weeks, or at least a couple of days in advance of an assignment or an exam, then you can work in smaller chunks each day to produce a better product or to absorb the information you're trying to study a little bit easier. And then that way it doesn't all pile up and force you into an all-nighter or a frenzied study session where you're just not getting all of the information to absorb. Also, it's really important to schedule breaks throughout your study time. I see a lot of students in student success coaching who try to study from the early morning until the late night on the weekends, and then they wonder why, first, they feel really tired the rest of the week, and then second, why they don't feel like they accomplished as much. And that's because your brain can only take so much and your body can only take so much of one activity at a time. So breaks are super important. Even if it's just a 5 or 10 minute break to step away from studying and let your mind rest and refresh, that can be so beneficial. And when you're making your schedules each week, if you schedule your breaks in between the things that you need to accomplish, then you're doing yourself a favor and practicing a little self-care. And then also, I think it's really important to schedule a time to stop for the day. If you just have an extended study session that lasts until you fall asleep every day, you're probably going to burn out and you're going to get so exhausted. So if you give yourself a set time, you'll have something to look forward to. And you know that at 8 or 9 o'clock or whatever time you choose that you can stop studying for the day, and it will also make the studying that you do up until that point even that much more effective. Next, some more general tips on avoiding procrastination. That can be a huge problem for a lot of people, and so if you are someone who procrastinates a lot, I suggest keeping a work progress journal. So look at your schedule, maybe keep a calendar for a week and write down everything that you're doing and during the times you're doing them, and see how much time you sort of waste by procrastinating, and then set an intention for the following week to create a schedule where you put things in those time slots that you can accomplish. And I promise that you will feel much more accomplished, and it will sort of start to teach your brain that procrastination maybe isn't the best way to go. Then I suggest making an event of the worst tasks. So what do y'all think I mean by that?
Do you mean like the hardest ones?
Yeah, are the things that you're dreading the most? Yeah, so if you figure out a way to maybe reward yourself once you finish the thing that you don't want to do, or it's something that you dread, so you make an agreement with yourself to get it out of the way very first, and then you can work on the things that you enjoy a little bit more. Or even just if you finish the worst thing or the dreaded task, then stop and have a dance party or whatever you enjoy and whatever makes you feel good and re-energized. Build your work routines to make steady progress. So again, time management is so important. So if you can get into a routine of knowing that I go to class at 9 a.m. and then I have this break between classes at 10 a.m. So I'm always going to go to the library and study these 2 subjects, or I'm going to go and finish assignments, and then I have class at 10, and then if you have a regular routine, you're much more likely to stick to it, and that can help you to create a steady progress picture for yourself. And then also choose your hard days. So one of the advantages of managing your time and keeping track of it in advance is that you can plan out what day you want to maybe do the most of your assignments, or do the studying for the class that you enjoy the least or that challenges you the most. And then you can get that out of the way and again go start working on the subjects that you enjoy, or have time to take a break and spend time with your friends. So planning those things in advance and getting the hardest stuff or the most challenging stuff out of the way first can free up your schedule and then free up your mind so you don't have to worry about it as much. So now we're going to move into note-taking. So I have here 8 steps for effective note-taking. When you are going to class, I suggest that you arrive on time, because if at all possible, of course, because that could be, you could have a professor who jumps right into really important stuff in that first minute or 2 of class, and you don't want to miss anything. And that also allows you to get settled and get out your laptop or your notebook or whatever you're going to use to take notes, and plan how you're going to take those notes before class actually gets started. And number 2, make preparations. So again, getting your laptop ready and your notebook ready, whatever it is that is most comfortable for you, and putting a heading at the top of what the class is and what the date is, and keeping yourself organized is really important. When your professors or instructors are talking, if you can identify key terms, so instead of just trying to furiously write down every single word that the professor is saying, if you listen and try to find key terms and key themes and just take note of those items, that will be helpful to you to go back and study later. So then write down all of your key terms and define and explain the key terms. So if you identify that something is a key term, but you haven't quite caught the definition, you can always leave a little bit of room for yourself and go back as soon as you can after class and look up that definition and add it to your notes. Also, develop your own shorthand. So again, I don't suggest trying to write down every single word or type out every single word that your professor says, but if there is something that you really want to get a quote that they've said, it can be helpful if you have developed your own shorthand or your own way to abbreviate, or you know, if you, instead of writing because every time, you write be and then a slash and a C, and you understand that that means because. If you develop your own code, then you don't have to write out every word or type out every word, and it'll make it go quicker. And then also you will understand what you need when you go back later. Construct a rough outline. So while you're taking notes, if you take them in an outline pattern where you have a heading for each sort of broad subject area, and then if you're on your computer, you tab over and then have things that go under that subject area, that's a really great way to think and follow along while you're taking notes, and then it also makes it really easy to study later. Oh, I think I forgot a word here. Note the general theme of the lecture would be the next, number 8. So think while you're listening to your professor, try to think about what it is that they are really trying to get across to you. What is the theme that we're working with here? And take note of that while you are taking your notes. Any questions or comments or thoughts on those steps? Okay. Some additional pro tips. If you're taking notes in your discussion-based classes, so these are the ones where a lot of time you're spent, or a lot of the time in class is spent talking to others about the subject matter rather than the professor standing up and lecturing. It's really important to write less and talk more in those classes. You'll find that if you participate and ask questions and share your thoughts and ideas, that will help your brain to absorb the information a little bit more. Plus, oftentimes in those discussion-based classes, you're being graded on your participation. So it's important to make an extra effort to participate in those classes. Note-taking in non-technical courses. So by non-technical, I mean courses that are not really math or equation-based. So psychology, politics, political science, classes like those, you want to look for the big ideas using a pattern of question, evidence, and conclusion. So those instructors will typically start out their lecture with a broad question or a problem, and then they'll provide evidence throughout their lecture and bring it all together in a conclusion. So if you can follow that pattern while you are in a class such as psychology or political science, then you will get the bulk of the lecture under those 3 headings. And then note-taking in technical courses, it's just really important to prioritize. These are courses that are equation or math-based, so if you have the equations available in your textbook, maybe it's not as important to take notes of the equations as much as it is to take notes of the instructions that the professor is providing to you while explaining those equations. Next, for study skills, my first suggestion to you is to study the syllabus. Your professors will spend a lot of time putting together each class's syllabus each semester to make sure that they have included all of these things in this list. A description of the course, the objectives of the course, what textbooks and supplies they suggest that you buy, grading structure, classroom rules and expectations, and then information on the class like due dates and explanations of what your assignments are going to be comprised of. So it's really important to familiarize yourself with the syllabus and record it into whatever time management system that you have, so you know when you need to study and when the big tests are coming up. And then you can see everything from every class all together on one calendar and know when those hard days are coming or when you need to reward yourself for accomplishing the things that are not as fun for you as far as studying is concerned. And then next, for studying, to study effectively, it's important to figure out what works best for you. I could give you all kinds of advice, but if it's just not something that works well for you, trying to do it because I said you should do it is not going to work out. So, for instance, some people can study with music on and they do really well. And if they don't have that music, then they have trouble focusing. But other people need complete silence to study, and if music is on, then that will distract them from what they're doing, and again, they won't do really well. So it's important to find out what pieces of studying and what goes into studying is going to work really well for you. It's also important to choose when, where, and how long you'll study. So if you find that you get really distracted if you're in your room and trying to study, then it's important to find a location where you aren't going to be as distracted. It's also important to know yourself and to know when is the prime time for you to study. I learned in college that I study really well in the early morning. So instead of pulling all-nighters, I would go ahead and go to sleep and then get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and start studying because that was when I was awake and ready to do that. That didn't work for everybody. So you need to sort of test yourself and look inward and see what it is that works the best for you on the time and the location, and then also how long you'll study. Pay attention to when your mind starts to wander or when you lose focus, and consider planning breaks for to break up those chunks of time. So if you are really, really good at studying for 2 hours straight, but you start to lose focus and your mind starts to think about what's for lunch or what can I catch up on Netflix, then maybe you need to have a 15 or 20-minute break after every 2 hours of studying, and you can begin to create your plan or your time management system around that idea. Again, think carefully about studying in your room. That's where you sleep, that's where you relax. So sometimes it's hard to make our brains want to study in our room because that's where we have our off time. But if that's really where you do well studying, then that's okay too. Don't fall asleep on the job. So if you find that you're getting sleepy, maybe try to get up and go for a walk, drink a glass of ice water, something to wake up, or maybe that means it's time to go to sleep and then plan to get up early and study some more. And then also do your best to be organized. So again, adding everything to your planner or however your time management system is configured, and planning those hard days and planning those breaks is really, really important. But also keeping your notes and your notebooks or your files on your computer really organized is going to help you in the long run, because when you are looking for the notes to fill in your study guide, you don't want to have to go searching through every drawer in your room or every file on your computer to try to find the one definition that you're looking for. So I suggest keeping a notebook or a section of a binder or a dedicated file on your computer for each class, and being really diligent about adding all of your notes and your important information into the sections that you created. Let's see. So next, I have some some specific skills that are really helpful for the actual studying. So when you do need to memorize things like dates or equations or definitions, if you consider using flashcards, that can be very, very helpful, but it's important to start with your flashcards and your memorization early and not wait until the very last minute. Using image and name associations, that can be especially helpful if you are studying vocabulary for a second language or a foreign language, or if you are studying vocabulary just for anatomy and physiology. If you can try to picture what the word is that you're trying to learn, that can help. And then also, I really love this concept of building a memory palace. So if you're an imaginative or a visual person and you think of your memory as a vast palace, or for instance, I kind of think of mine as a library, and I have different file folders that I envision when I'm putting something in my memory bank or trying to withdraw things from my memory bank. And so because I'm visual, I think of actually physically going through a file, and that helps me to remember things. And so when I'm trying to place a long-term memory in my brain, I think of what file I would put it in and envision all of that. It may sound hokey, it may not work for everybody, but it is something that is beneficial, I think, especially for visual learners. Don't be hesitant to ask for extra help. Tutoring can be great because you can get another perspective or a little bit more focused attention from someone who has a lot of expertise in a specific class. Having study groups, as long as you can keep your study group focused on studying and not becoming a social group, then that can be really beneficial, because again, you're going to get different perspectives, and everyone in the study group probably heard different pieces of the lecture and probably absorbed different pieces of the reading. So you can share what you have learned and what has really stuck with you, and then gather other information from people that have different things that they've learned. If your professor offers a review session, or if you hear of a review session that is happening, I really, really suggest going to those, because again, you can get different perspectives and different information that you didn't absorb in class or from your reading, and that can really help to stick the information into your brain. And then always talk to your professor. I think I have a slide about it later, specific questions that you can ask your professor, but it's helpful just to ask, what does the test look like? Is it multiple choice questions? Is it short answer? How long does each question typically take students to answer? Or even specific questions about your professor's area of expertise. Learning more about why they're so passionate about what they teach and what made them choose to teach it can also make it a little bit more appealing and a little bit more, help it to stick in your brain a little bit more. Next, quiz and recall. So if you are studying something that you can quiz yourself on, it's really actually helpful to quiz yourself out loud and not just in your brain. I know that can seem silly, and it depends on where you're studying, whether you are able to do this or not, but it is very helpful to say things out loud, ask yourself a question, and then answer the question. And then also just to talk things out. Another great method that I have in the next little section is teaching others. When you teach someone something, it helps you to retain it even better. And so it's kind of that same principle with quiz and recall out loud. You can also do it with your study group or with a study buddy, and do it multiple times, because that'll help you to retain the information. Also, make a study schedule. Again, study early and often. Use small blocks to review and cram carefully. So I say that because cramming it's been shown that it really doesn't work, and it doesn't help you to effectively absorb the information as much as many students want to think it does. So let's say that you arrive for your test and you've taken your study materials with you and you're going over things in your mind before the test starts and you just can't remember one date or one event, then that would be the time to sort of cram by going back and reviewing your notes and really trying to commit to putting that date or that concept into your memory palace right before the test. But I do not suggest waiting until the night before a test or a few hours before a test to begin studying. That's the kind of cramming that is not going to be helpful or beneficial to you. And then acronyms, so use your words. So acronyms are really helpful to help you to remember phrases of things. One acronym we use a lot in my world is talking about SMART goals, and the acronym is SMART because they are specific and measurable, attainable, and oh my gosh, I forgot what the R is, and time bound. So it can help. Again, see, I need to go back into my memory palace and try to remember the R. But the acronym helps us to remember. Also, if you always alliterate, so alliterate means to put the same letter at the beginning of a word. So always alliterate is an alliteration because both of those words start with A. So if you can develop some key terms and use alliteration by maybe using some synonyms for the terms, then that can help you to remember a little bit more too. Using mnemonic devices. So do you all remember from math in maybe middle school, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally? Did anybody use that? Yeah, do you remember what it was for?
Orders of operation.
Yes, yeah, so see how that's stuck in your brain? Mnemonic devices are great ways to remember things because you're creating a phrase or a poem or a song or a chant or something that helps you to remember, and that really tends to stick in your brain a lot more. Similarly with songs and jingles. So if you are someone who really enjoys music, you might consider singing songs or creating songs and jingles for the things that you want to remember. I think that there was one about state capitals when I was a kid, and there was one about the presidents when I was a kid that were really helpful to learn. I have since flushed those things out of my memory palace, but you might have some other concepts that it can be really helpful to try to take the words and match it with a tune that you already know and really enjoy. And then you can, when you're walking across campus or running errands or doing other things, you can sort of sing it to yourself to help to retain it even more. And then, like I said, teaching other people, it makes you have to learn the concept even better to be able to teach it to someone else. So in teaching, you're also sharing and repeating the information, and so then that helps you to retain it more too. Then review. So read over your notes. I suggest if you're able to, as close to the end of class as possible, go back and read over your notes to help you to retain that information right after you've been exposed to it. And then practice repeated exposure. So again, start early and often with your studying. And if you study a little bit each day, that's going to help you to build your knowledge over time. Sleep on it. So some studies have actually shown that if you study something right before you are about to go to sleep, then your brain will retain it while you're sleeping, and it will build it into a long-term memory. So maybe if you are struggling to go to sleep, you can start to read some of your notes, and that can help you to fall asleep And also then that information is in your brain as you're falling asleep, and that's where your brain does the work to retain information while you're resting. Look over old exams. So if you have taken a class from a professor before, even if it's a different class than what you're taking now, if you want to look over those exams that that professor provided, that can help you to get perspective on what they are likely to do with the exam in your current class. Or even if you're studying for exam 3, go back and check out exam 1 from whatever class you're in to try to evaluate what the professor has expected and what the format is, because that's going to help you to be prepared, make it less likely that you're going to be nervous going in, and also just give you some insight on what the professor might be asking for in their upcoming exam. And then read and review other sources. So let's say you are talking about a concept in a biology class and you sort of understand it, but it really interests you. If you go to the library and search for journal articles on this concept and read those, then that's going to help to reinforce that concept in your mind, and also can help you to really understand it more, again, because it's coming from another perspective. So hearing someone else's explanation can be very, very helpful. That's a lot of tips there. Are there any questions? Or does anybody have any other tips that they follow? Okay. All right, yes, so here's the slide that I mentioned about talking to your professor. Professors really appreciate it when you show interest in what they are passionate about. I have always given the tip in the very beginning, the first or second day of class, to approach your professor after class and say, introduce yourself and say that you're excited about the class, if that's true. Or ask them some questions about what got them interested in the field, or how they suggest that you study and prepare for their class. You'll not only stand out to the professor, but also they're going to be excited to be able to help you to be successful in their course. And you can ask them when a test is coming up for the format of the exam, asking about how many sections or points or what percentage of your overall grade this is, if that's not available readily on the syllabus. That will help you to prepare and to ease your nerves as you're going into a test, because it's much easier if you know what to expect to relax beforehand. Asking what material will the exam cover. Will it be a cumulative exam? Will it cover everything that you've talked about all semester, or is it only going to cover certain sections? That can be helpful for you to know how to prepare. And then also suggestions for studying. So you could even ask your professor, if you were studying for this exam, how would you do it? And their tips are probably going to be really helpful because they've studied this stuff for a very long time, so they know what has been helpful for them. Also, your well-being matters while you're studying, so please don't forget to take care of yourself. Do things to conquer stress and panic. You can practice relaxation exercise or take part in other relaxing activities. So you could try breathing exercises or meditation, or if you feel stress coming on and going out for a walk helps, that could be good. Or even watching a couple of YouTube videos or something that can help you to calm your stress. If you're stressed and you let the stress continue to build, then the information that you're trying to absorb while studying is not going to be retained as easily. Also, avoid alarmists. So try your best to stay away from classmates who are in a state of stress and panic and can't seem to get out of it, especially those who didn't take the time to prepare like all of you are going to do. These people are like, they are on a sinking ship and they really want your help, but guess what? They'll probably bring you down with them if you take time away from studying to try to calm them down. So I suggest staying away from them before the test, and then if they're a really good friend to you, maybe after the test, sharing some of your study skills with them to help them to be more successful and to not get so alarmed right before an exam. So next, take breathers. Like I said, breaks are so important. So step away from studying for small periods of time when you can. And if you struggle with doing this, make sure that you plan in advance and add it to your time management system. And if you still struggle with it, you can consider adding alarms on your phone when you're having intense study sessions to remind you to step away. It's just, I can't enforce enough how important it is to take breaks while you are studying or working on your assignments, so that your brain has a break, your body has a break, and you can refocus your attention. All right, so next we're going to go to test taking. I mentioned earlier, bring all of your materials to your test if that is allowed. So if your professor has expressly stated that you are not to bring your materials, then don't do that. But if it's not forbidden, then bring your materials just in case you forget something or need to reinforce something in your mind before the test. Make sure to choose a good seat. Try not to sit somewhere where you're not going to get distracted. Read directions really carefully. I suggest reading your directions on your test at least twice, maybe even 3 times, to make sure that you're catching everything that the instructor is expecting of you on the test. And then also begin with a full read through. So try to read all the instructions and read as much of the questions as you can to get a feel for what to expect. Pace yourself and build a time budget. So this is again why it's important to look at all through the very last page of your test, so you know what to expect and you know how much time to allot yourself. Proceed from easy to hard. If you go ahead and complete the easy portions, then you'll have that much more time to work on the hard portions. Always write something unless the directions mention a penalty for wrong answers. So again, this is why it's really important to pay attention to the directions. But let's say you're taking a fill in the blank test and you can't seem to remember what one of the answers is. If you're not going to get a penalty for wrong answers, it's better to put something in that blank than to leave it blank, because maybe you're close to the answer and you can get partial credit, or maybe you know the right answer and you're just doubting yourself. So unless there's a penalty, always put something down for an answer. If you forget something, try to visualize. So that would be where, if you have used visualizations during your studying for vocabulary words, or if you are practicing the memory palace concept, try to close your eyes and visualize what it is that you are struggling to remember. And you might surprise yourself and remember it. And then also, if time allows, go back and check your work. This can be helpful just in case you missed a question, but also if there were any questions that you were really unsure of the answers for, if you have time at the end of your exam, you can always go back and think about it again and reconsider whether the answer that you wrote is the one you want to stick with, or if you want to try to develop a different answer. All right. So this is strategies for essay questions. Read your essay questions carefully first and try to identify exactly what the question is asking you to answer. If you have a choice of essay questions, let's say you have 3 essay questions you can choose from to complete your exam, then it is important to read all of those questions and then choose the question that you feel the most comfortable answering, and then don't look back at the other questions. Don't doubt yourself in your selection. distract yourself from answering the question that you selected. Also, outline your essay. Use a 3-part structure to outline it. So provide an introduction, a body, and a conclusion to answer the question. And then as you're going through and writing your essay, make sure that you are answering the question that has been asked of you. Then demonstrate your knowledge. Make it crystal clear that you not only know the information, but you've mastered it. So try to share the things that you have learned in studying, or if you remember something particular that your professor said about a concept in class and it fits within your essay, you can quote them so that you can show them that you have actually mastered the information that they are trying to help you to learn. And then really importantly, pace yourself. Keep an eye on time if you are taking a timed exam, and make sure that you have your essay introduction, body, and conclusion outlined and ready so that you don't run out of time in the middle. All right. And some more final tips here. Ask questions during class. That shows your professor that you're interested. It helps them to get to know you, which can make them much more enthusiastic about educating you and helping you outside of class if you need it. Develop the habit of talking to your professor after class. Again, that's going to help them to recognize that you're interested in what is happening in the class and you're interested in what they're teaching. And then talk to your classmates. Different perspectives on information can be so incredibly helpful, and your classmates may absorb things that you miss, and you can share that information. Or you can quiz each other, or you can teach each other, and that can help you to learn and absorb information even more. All right. So what questions do you all have? All right, well, if you think of questions, you can always send me an email, or like I mentioned, student success coaching is something that's offered through my office, and I'm in charge of it. And that's a holistic approach to helping students to be more successful. So if you find that you're struggling with study skills and you need some more guidance, we can certainly help with that. Or if you need to improve your time management skills, or assistance with getting involved or learning how to connect with professors or your peers on campus, then we can help with all of those things. And the student success coaching is available on the SDS website. I will have attendance records here, so I can share that with you via email and share this presentation with you too. I'm happy to do that. So last chance, any questions? All right, well, I hope this was helpful. Thank you for coming to the Student Success Series, and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Brianne, are you there?
Yeah.
So I was like 3 minutes late. Are you all by yourself in there?
Yeah, I'm by myself.
I figured when I saw